Hello, night owls of the Midnight Paradox. When the world goes quiet, it's time to face the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we ignore. With Robert A. Johnson's Owning Your Own Shadow, we'll uncover what's buried in our psyche and learn how to embrace it for a more honest life. In the vast landscape of the human psyche, there exists a hidden realm that most of us prefer to ignore, a dark corner where the light of consciousness rarely penetrates. This is the shadow, a term borrowed from the profound insights of Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the unconscious like an explorer charting unknown territories. The shadow is not merely a metaphor for evil or negativity. It is the repository of all those aspects of ourselves that we have disowned, repressed, or simply failed to recognize. It is the sum of our unlived potentials, our forbidden desires, and our unacknowledged weaknesses. To introduce the shadow is to invite a journey into the self, one that promises not destruction but wholeness, for as Jung taught, and as I have come to understand through years of analytical practice, the shadow is an integral part of who we are. Imagine, if you will, a child born into the world, pure and undifferentiated, like a blank canvas awaiting the strokes of life's brush. From the earliest moments, society, family, and culture begin to shape this canvas. We are taught what is good and what is bad, what is acceptable and what must be hidden. The polite child suppresses anger, the ambitious student denies laziness, the devout believer rejects doubt. These rejected traits do not vanish. They descend into the shadow, gathering energy in the unconscious. Over time, the shadow grows, becoming a powerful force that influences our behavior in ways we scarcely comprehend. It is like the roots of a great tree, unseen yet sustaining the visible branches. Without acknowledging these roots, the tree cannot thrive fully. The shadow originates in the process of individuation, Jung's term for the lifelong quest to become a complete self. As we develop our ego, the conscious I that navigates the world, we necessarily create opposites. Light requires darkness, virtue demands vice. The shadow is the other side, the complement to our persona, that polished mask we wear in public. But here's the paradox. The more we strive for perfection in our conscious life, the stronger the shadow becomes. It accumulates the gold of our personality, those vibrant, creative energies that culture deems unacceptable. As I reflect on my own life, spent in the quiet contemplation of monasteries and the analytical rooms of Zurich, I see how my early rejection of certain emotions led to their shadowy empowerment. It was only through confronting them that I found balance. Consider the myth of Eden, a story woven into the fabric of Western consciousness. Adam and Eve live in paradise until they eat from the tree of knowledge, awakening to good and evil. This act symbolizes the birth of the shadow, the moment when innocence gives way to duality. Before the fall, there is no shadow because there is no opposition, everything is one. But with knowledge comes separation, and the shadow emerges as the price of awareness. In many cultures, similar tales abound. The Greek myth of Pandora's box, where curiosity unleashes all evils upon the world, or the Hindu concept of Maya, the illusion that veils the unity of existence. These myths remind us that the shadow is not a personal failing, but a universal human condition. Yet, the shadow is not inherently malevolent. It often contains positive qualities we have repressed out of fear or conformity. A gentle person might shadow their assertiveness, leading to passive aggression. A rational thinker might deny their intuition, missing creative insights. The shadow is amoral, a neutral force that simply is. Its darkness comes from our refusal to illuminate it. As Jung noted, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This making conscious is the essence of shadow work, a spiritual discipline that demands courage and humility. In everyday terms, the shadow manifests as those inexplicable moods or reactions that catch us off guard. Why do we suddenly lash out at a loved one over a trivial matter? Why do we envy the success of a friend when we profess contentment? These are shadow eruptions, moments when the unconscious demands attention. Ignoring them leads to neurosis. Embracing them fosters growth. I recall a patient, a successful businessman, who projected his laziness onto his employees, calling them idle. Only when he owned his own need for rest did his anxiety subside and his leadership improve. The introduction to the shadow is thus an invitation to self-compassion. We are all dual beings, light and dark intertwined. To deny the shadow is to live half a life. To own it is to step towards sainthood, as Jung suggested. This process begins with awareness, a gentle observation of our inner contradictions. As we delve deeper, we discover that the shadow holds the key to our untapped potential, waiting to be integrated. Let us explore further. The shadow forms in childhood through the process of socialization. Parents, teachers, and peers reinforce certain behaviors while punishing others. A boy who cries is told to man up, shadowing his sensitivity. A girl who asserts herself is labeled bossy, repressing her strength. These early wounds create the shadow's core, a collection of not me traits that nonetheless belong to us. Over time, the shadow becomes autonomous, acting independently of our will. Dreams often reveal it. Nightmares of pursuit by dark figures symbolize the shadow chasing us for recognition. Mythologically, the shadow appears as the trickster or the devil. In Christianity, Lucifer falls from heaven, embodying rejected pride. In Native American lore, Coyote tricks humans into facing their flaws. These archetypes teach that the shadow is a teacher, not an enemy. By introducing ourselves to it, we begin the alchemical process of transformation, turning base metal into gold. But why bother? Because an unowned shadow wreaks havoc. It leads to fanaticism, where we crusade against in others what we deny in ourselves. History is rife with examples. The inquisitors who tortured heretics, projecting their own doubts. The tyrants who oppress, shadowing their vulnerability. On a personal level, it causes depression, addiction, or relational strife. Owning the shadow frees us from these chains, allowing authentic living. In this introduction, I urge you to pause and reflect. What traits do you most despise in others? There lies your shadow. Approach it not with judgment, but with curiosity. As we proceed, we'll see how the shadow plays out in daily life. But for now, remember, the shadow is your ally in the quest for wholeness. It is the dark side that makes the light shine brighter. We live our days in a world that demands we present our best selves, polished, agreeable, productive. Yet beneath this facade, the shadow stirs, influencing our every interaction, decision, and reaction in ways we rarely notice until they erupt. The shadow does not dwell in some distant mythological realm. It permeates the ordinary rhythm of life, manifesting in the quiet resentments of a family dinner, the sharp criticism at a board meeting, or the inexplicable attraction to a partner who embodies traits we claim to despise. The shadow is the unlived life pressing for expression, and ignoring it turns daily existence into a battleground of unconscious projections and depleted energy. To understand the shadow in everyday life is to recognize how it shapes our relationships, work, and society, offering not just disruption but the raw vitality needed for authentic living. At its core, the shadow operates through projection, the unconscious act of attributing our disowned qualities to others. Johnson explains that without conscious work, the shadow is almost always projected. That is, It is neatly laid on someone or something else, so we do not have to take responsibility for it. This medieval holdover persists in modern life, where we fortress our egos against vulnerability, projecting aggression onto a rude driver or laziness onto a colleague. Consider a typical morning commute. Traffic builds, and you honk furiously at the car ahead, cursing their incompetence. In that moment, your shadowed impatience, repressed to maintain a calm image, erupts, displacing onto a stranger what you refuse to own. Johnson recounts a personal anecdote that captures this clumsily. After enduring difficult house guests with saintly patience, he unconsciously unleashed his pent-up frustration on an innocent nurseryman, buying a plant but sparking a needless argument. Balance was served, but in a clumsy and stupid way. This seesaw of the psyche, light virtues demanding dark counterweights, illustrates how daily denials accumulate, forcing crude compensations. In relationships, the shadow's presence is most intimate and revealing. Romantic love, Johnson argues, is often the grandest projection of all. We cast the gold of our shadow, the noble, divine potentials we deny ourselves, onto the beloved, mistaking them for gods. To fall in love is to project the most noble and infinitely valuable part of one's being onto another human being, he writes. The infatuated gaze obliterates the partner's humanity, seeing instead our own unlived divinity. This explains the fairy tale rush of early romance, where couples tread on stardust, but also the inevitable crash when projections withdraw. The partner, now seen realistically, disappoints, revealing the shadow's betrayal. Johnson notes, one does a curious kind of insult to another by falling in love with him, for we are really looking at our own projection of God, not at the other person. Mature love emerges only after reclaiming this gold, allowing two wholes to unite rather than halves to cling. This dynamic plays out in familial bonds too. A parent who shadows their anger projects it onto a rebellious child, disciplining harshly what mirrors their own unexpressed rage. Siblings compete not over resources but over disowned traits. The responsible one resents the free spirit, projecting their buried desire for spontaneity. In friendships, we befriend those who embody our shadows, the adventurous companion for the homebody, living vicariously until resentment builds. Johnson warns that such projections leave us fragmented, exchanging genuine connection for illusory completeness. Daily life becomes a hall of mirrors, where every conflict signals a shadow encounter. To navigate this, Johnson suggests pausing during triggers. What in me does this evoke? Withdrawing the projection reclaims energy, transforming relational strife into growth. Work amplifies the shadow's everyday grip, where societal roles demand suppression of unprofessional impulses. The ambitious executive, repressing vulnerability, projects incompetence onto subordinates, fostering toxic hierarchies. Burnout strikes the overachiever who shadows rest, their denied fatigue erupting as irritability or illness. Johnson observes that modern workplaces, like medieval fortresses, thrive on mutual projections. Competition masks collective insecurities. Innovation stifles creativity buried in the shadow. A team meeting devolves into blame when unspoken envies surface. Your colleague's promotion triggers your shadowed inadequacy, veiled as fair critique. In creative fields, the shadow fuels breakthroughs but sabotages if ignored. Artists block when repressing dark inspirations like rage or eroticism. Johnson's towel-throwing ritual exemplifies harnessing shadow energy for daily demands. Exhausted before a lecture, he dampened a towel, balled it, and hurled it at the floor while shouting, foolish yet invigorating. Emerging, there was fire in my eyes. The shadow backed me, but did not overwhelm me. This cathartic act channels repressed vitality, proving confrontation yields stamina over exhaustion. In routine tasks, ignored shadows manifest as procrastination or sabotage. Owning them, perhaps through a private rant or journaling, restores flow. Contemporary offices, with their wellness apps and therapy mandates, hint at awakening to this. Yet many still project shadows onto toxic bosses or lazy teams, perpetuating cycles. Society at large is a cauldron of collective shadow, where individual denials aggregate into cultural eruptions. The front page of any newspaper hurls the collective shadow at us. Johnson declares, with disasters, crimes, and scandals feeding our outward darkness. Movies, fashion, and social media serve as shadow depositories. We devour villainous antiheroes or viral outrage, investing unlived impulses externally. Healthy cultures, Johnson posits, express shadows symbolically through rituals, festivals of inversion like Carnival, where norms flip to honor the forbidden. Unhealthy ones resort to low-grade outlets, wars, violence, psychosomatic epidemics, neurotic plagues. All healthy societies have a rich ceremonial life. Less healthy ones rely on unconscious expressions, he writes. Historical examples abound. The medieval world, per Johnson, was based on mutual shadow projection. Armored knights, walled cities, patriarchal dominance. All projections of denied femininity and vulnerability. The church scapegoated heretics, laying collective doubts upon them. Ancient rites reveal conscious management. Aztecs sacrificed chosen youth maidens bearing communal sins. India's bogeyman absorbed evils, honored until slain, his power derived from the group's shadow. The bogeyman will get you if you are not good, echoes this, frightening children with externalized darkness. Today, cancel culture projects moral shadows onto public figures, while polarized politics, left projecting authoritarianism onto right, vice versa, mirrors racial, religious scapegoating. Men lay their shadow upon women, whites upon blacks, capitalists upon communists. In our digital age, social media amplifies this. Algorithms feed shadow content, conspiracy theories, body shaming, drawing us to what we deny. Influencers embody collective gold, projecting aspirations onto curated perfection. Pandemics or economic crashes erupt collective shadows, revealing hoarding instincts or xenophobia. Johnson urges recognition. The tendency to see one's shadow out there in one's neighbor or in another race is the most dangerous aspect of the modern psyche. It has created two devastating wars and threatens the destruction of all the fine achievements of our modern world. We decry chaos, yet contribute, our personal shadows fueling the collective beast. Myths illuminate these patterns. Dr. Jekyll's potion unleashes Mr. Hyde, the shadowed ID rampaging through respectable life, a cautionary tale of repression's cost. In Greek lore, Dionysus embodies ecstatic shadow, disrupting Apollo's order. Societies need both for wholeness. Fairy tales' wicked witches or wolves are projected shadows, teaching children to integrate rather than fear. Practically, spotting the shadow demands vigilance. Notice disproportionate reactions. Road rage signals repressed assertiveness, chronic lateness, shadowed rebellion. Dreams feature pursuers or monsters, shadow figures demanding dialogue. Journal triggers. What quality do I ascribe to them that I disown? Active imagination, per Jung, personifies the shadow for conversation. Rituals honor it. Burn written sins, dance wildly alone, or fast to feel vulnerability's edge. Johnson advises symbolic expression. Ceremony and ritual are a far more intelligent means of accomplishing the same thing. Yet resistance persists. Owning the shadow disrupts comfort. Positive traits, gold, evoke terror. The timid discovering inner nobility feels godlike, overwhelming. Daily integration builds resilience. A manager owning ambition fosters fair leadership. A couple withdrawing love projections deepens intimacy. Energy flows, life vivifies. In this chaotic era, climate crises, AI disruptions, identity fractures, the shadow's everyday roar grows. Ignoring it invites neurotic drift. Embracing it forges wholeness. As we balance light and dark, daily life transcends survival, becoming sacred. The shadow, once foe, allies in authenticity. The shadow, that hidden reservoir of our disowned selves, does not remain quietly tucked away in the recesses of the psyche. It seeks expression, and its primary language is projection, the unconscious act of casting our rejected traits, desires, or potentials onto others. Johnson describes projection as the shadow's default mechanism, a sleight of hand by which we attribute to the world what we refuse to see in ourselves. The shadow is almost always projected. That is, it is neatly laid on someone or something else, so we do not have to take responsibility for it, Johnson writes. This process shapes our daily interactions, fuels societal conflicts, and, if left unchecked, fragments both our inner lives and our collective world. To understand the role of projection is to peer into the mirror of the psyche, recognizing that the flaws we condemn in others often reflect the shadows we deny within. Projection begins innocently enough, rooted in the socialization of childhood. A young girl, scolded for her assertiveness, learns to shadow her strength, deeming it unladylike. Later, she criticizes her friend's boldness, projecting her disowned power onto another. A boy, taught that sadness is weakness, buries his vulnerability and grows to resent overly emotional peers. These early lessons form the blueprint of projection, where the ego, desperate to maintain its polished image, externalizes what it cannot bear. Johnson illustrates this with a personal anecdote. After enduring difficult house guests with forced courtesy, he found himself snapping at an innocent nurseryman over a trivial plant purchase. "I paid for my shadow by making an ass of myself," he confesses, highlighting how projection displaces inner conflict onto unsuspecting targets. In daily life, we see this constantly. The colleague who calls others lazy shadows their own procrastination. The parent who scolds a child's anger denies their own suppressed rage. At its core, projection is a defense mechanism, a way to protect the ego from discomfort. Jung described it as the unconscious transfer of subjective contents onto an object, and Johnson simplifies this to a vivid metaphor. Projection is like a film projector casting images onto a screen, where the screen is another person, group, or even an idea. The object becomes a canvas for our shadow, carrying the weight of our unlived selves. This can manifest negatively, condemning a neighbor's greed while ignoring our own, or positively, as when we idealize a mentor, projecting onto them the wisdom or courage we fail to claim. Johnson emphasizes that projection is not inherently malicious. It is an instinctive response to the psyche's need for balance. Yet, it comes at a cost. By externalizing the shadow, we lose touch with our wholeness, creating a cycle of disconnection and blame. In personal relationships, projection is the silent saboteur of intimacy. Romantic love, Johnson argues, is often a grand projection of the shadow's gold, the divine, noble qualities we deny in ourselves. To fall in love is to project the most noble and infinitely valuable part of one's being onto another human being, he writes. In the throes of infatuation, we see our partner as a god or goddess, embodying the creativity, passion, or strength we've relegated to the shadow. This explains the euphoria of new love, where we tread on star dust, but also its fragility. When the projection fades, the partner's humanity emerges, and we feel betrayed, not by them, but by our own disowned divinity. Johnson notes, one does a curious kind of insult to another by falling in love with him, for we are really looking at our own projection of God, not at the other person. Mature love requires withdrawing this projection, owning the gold within, and seeing the other as they are. Familial dynamics offer another stage for projection. A parent who shadows their ambition may push a child to achieve, projecting their unlived dreams. Siblings, too, become screens. The responsible one projects freedom onto the reckless sibling, sparking rivalry. Friendships fare no better. How often do we resent a friend's success, projecting our own shadowed aspirations? Johnson recounts a patient, a woman who despised her sister's flamboyance, only to discover it mirrored her own suppressed desire for self-expression. By owning this, she not only healed their relationship, but also began painting, a passion long buried. Projection, then, is a double-edged sword. It distorts connection, but also points to what we must reclaim. Beyond the personal, projection shapes society's collective shadow. Johnson observes, the tendency to see one's shadow out there in one's neighbor or in another race or culture is the most dangerous aspect of the modern psyche. History is a testament to this danger. The Inquisition projected religious doubts onto heretics, burning them to silence inner conflicts. Colonial powers projected savagery onto indigenous peoples, justifying exploitation. In modern times, this continues through scapegoating. Racial, political, or cultural others become repositories for collective shadows. Johnson cites the 20th century's wars, driven by nations projecting their fears and greed onto enemies, threatening the destruction of all the fine achievements of our modern world. Today's polarized politics mirror this. One side projects authoritarianism, the other chaos, each refusing to see their own complicity. Mythology offers timeless insights into projection. In the biblical story of the scapegoat, the Israelites load their sins onto a goat, sending it into the wilderness to absolve the community. This ritual externalizes the collective shadow, cleansing through projection. Similarly, ancient India's bogeyman absorbed communal evils, honored as a sacred figure before being symbolically slain. These rituals reveal a wisdom modern societies often lack. Healthy cultures channel the shadow symbolically through festivals or art, rather than destructively through blame. Johnson contrasts this with our low-grade outlets, wars, crime, media frenzies, where the front page of any newspaper hurls the collective shadow at us. In our digital age, projection finds new avenues. Social media platforms amplify our shadows, feeding us content that mirrors our disowned fears or desires. The outrage over a celebrity's misstep often masks our own shadowed flaws. The idolization of influencers projects our unlived aspirations. Johnson would likely see platforms like X as modern scapegoats, where we cast our collective shadows, anger, envy, or idealism, onto viral posts or public figures. Cancel culture, for instance, is projection writ large. We purge others' sins to avoid facing our own. Even global crises, like pandemics or economic turmoil, become screens for collective shadows, with hoarding or xenophobia exposing denied instincts. Literature and myth further illuminate projection's role. In Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Stevenson portrays projection's peril. Jekyll's refusal to own his darker impulses births Hyde, a monstrous projection that consumes him. Greek mythology's Dionysus, god of ecstasy, is projected as chaos by Apollo's orderly followers, yet both are needed for balance. Fairy tales' wicked stepmothers or wolves are projected shadows, externalizing fears children must learn to integrate. Johnson suggests these stories teach us to confront, not flee, the shadow. Practically, withdrawing projection begins with awareness. Johnson advises noticing intense reactions. The person who triggers us most is often the one carrying our shadow. When irritation flares, say, at a co-worker's arrogance, ask, "What in me does this reflect?" Journaling helps. List qualities you dislike in others, then explore how they live in you. Dreams, too, reveal projections. Shadow figures like pursuers or villains demand dialogue. Jung's active imagination technique, where you converse with these figures, can reclaim projected traits. Rituals aid this. Johnson suggests symbolic acts, like writing a letter to your shadow or burning a list of projected qualities to honor its energy. The challenge is daunting. Owning projections threatens the ego's comfort, forcing us to admit flaws or untapped potentials. Positive projections, idealizing a hero, can be harder to withdraw, as they require claiming our own gold, which feels godlike and overwhelming. Yet, the rewards are profound. Relationships deepen as we see others clearly, not as screens. Conflicts lessen as we take responsibility. Creativity flows as shadowed energies return. Johnson recounts a patient who, by owning her projected jealousy, not only mended a friendship, but discovered her own ambition, launching a new career. Projection's role is thus paradoxical. It fragments us by externalizing the shadow, yet it points to what we must integrate. In daily life, it appears in every judgment, every obsession. In society, it fuels division but also reveals our shared humanity. By withdrawing projections, we reclaim our wholeness step by step. As Johnson urges, to honor and accept one's own shadow is a profound spiritual discipline that requires a new form of courage. This courage transforms the mirror of projection into a window to the self, inviting us to live authentically in a world of shadows. The shadow, that hidden well of our disowned selves, is not merely a burden to bear or a flaw to overcome. It is a source of raw, untamed energy, a reservoir of creativity waiting to be tapped. The shadow's paradoxical gift, the very traits we repress, anger, passion, fear, even vulnerability, hold the spark of our most profound creations. Far from being a destructive force, the shadow fuels art, innovation, and personal transformation when we dare to engage it. To explore the shadow's role in creativity is to discover that our darkest corners hold the light of inspiration, waiting to be channeled into expressions that make life vibrant and whole. Creativity thrives on tension, on the interplay of opposites within the psyche. The shadow, as the counterpoint to our conscious ego, provides this tension, like a taut string on a violin that produces music only when plucked. Johnson argues that our disowned qualities, those we've banished to the shadow for fear of shame or rejection, are not just negative traits, but often the gold of our potential. The timid person's shadowed assertiveness, the rationalist's buried intuition, the conformist's suppressed rebellion, these are the raw materials of creation. When we suppress them, we stifle our vitality. When we embrace them, we unlock a wellspring of energy. Johnson writes, "The shadow contains some of our most powerful energies, and if we are to live creatively, we must learn to tap those energies." Consider the artist, a figure often romanticized as tortured or eccentric. The painter who channels rage into bold, chaotic strokes, the poet who transforms grief into haunting verse. These creators draw directly from the shadow. Johnson points to historical examples like Beethoven, whose tempestuous symphonies seem to wrestle with his inner demons, or Van Gogh, whose vivid canvases pulse with the emotional intensity he could not contain in daily life. Their genius lay not in suppressing their shadows, but in giving them voice. I recall a patient, a quiet accountant who dreamed of painting but feared it was frivolous. When she began exploring her shadowed desire for expression, through tentative sketches of her childhood fears, she discovered not only talent, but a renewed zest for life. Her paintings, raw and unpolished, radiated authenticity, proof that the shadow's energy, once released, creates beauty. Mythology abounds with stories of creativity born from the shadow. In Greek lore, Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, embodies the chaotic, shadowed impulses that Apollo's order seeks to tame. Yet it is Dionysus who inspires art, dance, and revelry, reminding us that creation requires both structure and wildness. The myth of Prometheus, who steals fire from the gods, reflects the shadow's rebellious spark. His act of defiance brings light to humanity, but at the cost of eternal punishment. This mirrors the artist's struggle. To create from the shadow is to risk exposure, to face the discomfort of revealing what society deems unacceptable. Johnson suggests that every act of creation is a Promethean theft, reclaiming shadowed energies to forge something new. In everyday life, the shadow's creative potential manifests in subtler ways. The office worker who represses their adventurous spirit might find themselves doodling fantastical landscapes during meetings, their shadow leaking onto the page. The parent who denies their need for solitude might craft intricate bedtime stories for their children, channeling unexpressed imagination. These small acts hint at the shadow's longing to create, but without conscious engagement, they remain fleeting. Johnson recounts his own experience of exhaustion before a lecture, where he threw a damp towel at the floor in a burst of frustration. "There was fire in my eyes," he writes, noting how this shadowed energy revitalized him, turning a mundane talk into a dynamic performance. Such moments show that creativity need not be grand. It can emerge in daily tasks when we honor the shadow's vitality. Yet, the shadow's creative power comes with a catch. It demands confrontation. To tap its energy, we must face the discomfort of our disowned selves. This is why many avoid creativity altogether. It requires meeting the shadow head-on. The writer who procrastinates fears not just failure, but the raw emotions their work might unearth. The musician who abandons their craft shadows the vulnerability of public exposure. Johnson emphasizes that creativity is a spiritual discipline, akin to prayer or meditation, requiring courage to delve into the psyche's depths. To honor and accept one's own shadow is a profound spiritual discipline. He writes, and this discipline unlocks the creative flow that repression stifles. In society, the shadow's creative role is evident in cultural movements. The Romantic poets, like Shelley or Byron, embraced their inner turmoil, producing works that still resonate with their raw passion. The counterculture of the 1960s, with its music and art, drew from the collective shadow, rebellion against conformity, a cry for freedom suppressed by post-war rigidity. Johnson notes that healthy societies provide outlets for this energy through ritual and art. Ancient festivals like Saturnalia, where social norms flipped, allowed the shadow to express itself harmlessly, fostering creativity rather than destruction. Modern societies, however, often lack such outlets, leading to low-grade expressions, consumerism, sensationalist media, or fleeting trends that sap creative energy rather than nurture it. The digital age complicates this dynamic. Social media platforms, like X, offer spaces for creative expression but also tempt us to project our shadows outward, curating personas that deny our flaws. Viral art or music often stems from shadowed emotions, anger, longing, but the pressure to conform to trends can rebury these energies. Johnson would likely see the internet as a double-edged sword, a canvas for shadow-driven creativity, but also a trap for projecting our gold onto influencers or memes. Yet, those who dare to share authentic, shadow-infused creations, raw poetry, unfiltered vlogs, often resonate most deeply, proving the shadow's universal appeal. Practically, accessing the shadow's creativity requires intentional engagement. Journaling is a start. Write about emotions or desires you've suppressed, letting them flow without judgment. Dreams, as Jung taught, are a gateway to the shadow. Recurring images of chaos or rebellion signal creative energies waiting to be harnessed. Active imagination, where you dialogue with these dream figures, can spark ideas for art or problem solving. Rituals amplify this. Johnson suggests symbolic acts, like dancing to release pent-up passion or sculpting to externalize inner conflict. Even mundane tasks, cooking, gardening, become creative when infused with shadow awareness. A friend of mine, a lawyer, began woodworking after owning his shadowed need for manual labor. His crude tables, carved with frustration, became works of art. The shadow's creativity extends beyond art to personal transformation. When we reclaim disowned traits, we reinvent ourselves. The shy student who owns their shadowed charisma might start public speaking. The rigid planner who embraces spontaneity might travel impulsively, discovering new passions. Johnson shares the story of a woman who, after years of suppressing her wild side, took up flamenco dancing. Her movements, awkward at first, became a celebration of her reclaimed vitality, transforming her relationships and self-image. Creativity, in this sense, is not just making things, it's making ourselves anew. The risk lies in the shadow's intensity. Its energies, once unleashed, can overwhelm. The artist who taps their rage may create a masterpiece, but alienate loved ones if the energy spills unchecked. Johnson advises balance. The shadow backs me, but does not overwhelm me. Rituals help contain this power. Writing a furious letter and burning it, or painting anger onto a canvas, channels the shadow without letting it dominate. Timing matters too. Creative shadow work thrives in moments of quiet reflection, not amid chaos. A daily practice, like sketching or meditating on a shadowed trait, builds a bridge between conscious and unconscious, making creativity sustainable. Mythologically, the shadow's creative power echoes in stories of alchemy, where base metals transform into gold. The alchemist, like the artist, works with the shadow's raw material, chaos, darkness, to create something precious. In Christianity, Christ's descent into hell symbolizes diving into the shadow to redeem it, emerging with divine creativity. Eastern traditions, like the Hindu goddess Kali, embody this paradox. Her destructive dance births new creation. These stories remind us that creativity requires embracing the shadow's messiness, not sanitizing it. In our fractured world, where anxiety, comparison, and digital noise drown creativity, the shadow offers a lifeline. By reclaiming its energy, we transcend superficial expression, crafting lives and works that resonate with truth. Johnson's insight is clear. The shadow is not the enemy of creativity, but its source. To live creatively is to dance with our darkness, to let its fire illuminate our path. As we integrate the shadow, we not only create art, but become artists of our own existence, shaping a life that is authentic, vibrant, and whole. The shadow, that hidden part of ourselves we push into the dark, cannot be banished or ignored without cost. It demands recognition, not as an enemy to defeat, but as a partner in the journey toward wholeness. In Owning Your Own Shadow, Johnson presents the process of owning the shadow as a sacred discipline, a deliberate act of courage that transforms our inner chaos into harmony. This is not about erasing the shadow's rough edges, its anger, shame, or untapped brilliance, but about integrating them into our conscious life. To own the shadow is to reclaim the disowned pieces of ourselves, to weave them into a tapestry of authenticity through awareness, ritual, and patient self-acceptance. This process, though challenging, is the heart of psychological growth, offering a path to live more fully in each moment. Owning the shadow begins with awareness, a willingness to look at what we've hidden. The shadow thrives in denial, growing stronger the more we pretend it doesn't exist. Johnson likens it to a basement where we store everything we don't want to see. Old fears, forbidden desires, traits deemed unacceptable by family or culture. The first step is to open the door, to shine a light on what's been buried. This can start with a simple question: what do I dislike in others? The colleague who seems arrogant, the friend who's too emotional. These trigger points are mirrors reflecting our shadow. I once worked with a patient, a teacher, who raged against her students' laziness, only to realize she was projecting her own suppressed need for rest. By admitting this, she began to honor her limits, finding energy she didn't know she had. Awareness requires honesty, which is no small feat the ego resists, clinging to its polished image. To admit we harbor envy, cowardice, or even untapped creativity feels like betrayal, yet it's liberation. Johnson suggests starting with small observations. Notice moments of irritation or admiration in daily life. When you snap at a partner over a trivial matter, pause and ask, "What in me is stirred?" Journaling is a powerful tool here. Write down judgments about others, then reverse them. If I call them selfish, where am I selfish? This isn't about self-blame, but about curiosity. The shadow isn't evil, it's human. By naming it, we weaken its unconscious grip, making space for integration. Dreams offer another gateway. Jung believed the unconscious speaks through dreams, and the shadow often appears as a dark figure, a pursuer, a villain, or even a friend we distrust. Johnson recounts a dream of his own, where a shadowy figure chased him through a forest. Instead of running, he turned to face it, discovering it was not a threat, but a part of himself seeking attention. In waking life, this translated to owning his suppressed ambition, which had been leaking out as resentment. To engage dreams, keep a notebook by your bed. Record images or emotions upon waking, especially those that unsettle. Over time, patterns emerge, revealing shadowed traits longing for expression. Once awareness dawns, the next step is dialogue with the shadow. Jung's technique of active imagination is key here. Close your eyes. Visualize the shadow as a person or symbol and speak to it. Ask, "What do you want? What have I ignored?" This might feel strange, like talking to a ghost, but it's a conversation with yourself. A patient of mine, a reserved librarian, imagined her shadow as a wild dancer. Through dialogue, she uncovered a suppressed love for movement, leading her to take up salsa classes. The shadow, once feared, became a guide. This process doesn't require expertise, just a quiet space and an open mind. Start with 5 minutes, letting the shadow speak through images or words. Ritual is the bridge between awareness and integration. Johnson emphasizes that the shadow's energy, if left unchanneled, can erupt destructively. Think of road rage or sudden outbursts. Ritual offers a safe container, a way to honor the shadow without letting it dominate. He shares a personal ritual. Before a lecture, overwhelmed by exhaustion, he threw a damp towel at the floor, shouting to release pent-up frustration. The act was absurd but transformative, channeling shadowed energy into vitality. The shadow backed me but did not overwhelm me, he reflects. Simple rituals work. Write a letter to your shadow, listing its traits, then burn it to symbolize acceptance. Or draw a mandorla, two overlapping circles representing the union of light and dark, and meditate on its balance. These acts don't erase the shadow. They give it a place at the table. Mythology underscores the power of ritual. In ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries honored Demeter and Persephone, whose descent into the underworld mirrors the shadow's journey. Participants faced their inner darkness through symbolic acts, emerging renewed. In Christianity, confession serves a similar purpose, externalizing sins to integrate them. Johnson points to tribal rituals, like those of Native American cultures, where dancers embodied the community's shadow, transforming chaos into harmony. Modern life lacks such ceremonies, leaving us to project our shadows onto scandals or conflicts. Creating personal rituals, lighting a candle for a suppressed emotion, dancing to release anger, reclaims this ancient wisdom, grounding the shadow in daily life. The process is not linear, it's a spiral of growth. Owning the shadow means revisiting old wounds, facing setbacks with patience. Johnson warns against expecting perfection. You don't solve the shadow, you live with it. A businessman I knew struggled with his shadowed greed, projecting it onto cutthroat competitors. Through journaling and ritual, writing his desires and shredding the paper, he began to see his ambition as a drive for creativity, not destruction. Yet, he stumbled, snapping at colleagues when stressed. Each stumble was a lesson, teaching him to pause and reflect rather than react. The shadow demands humility, a willingness to be imperfect while striving for wholeness. Society complicates this process. Our culture rewards polished personas, punishing vulnerability or negative traits. Social media amplifies this, urging us to curate flawless lives while projecting flaws onto others. Johnson would see platforms like X as modern arenas for shadow projection, where viral outrage or idolization masks our disowned selves. Yet, they also offer opportunities. Sharing a raw, honest post can be a ritual of owning the shadow, inviting others to do the same. Collective shadow work begins with individuals. When we own our shadows, we reduce the projections fueling societal division. The shadow's goal poses a unique challenge. Reclaiming positive traits, creativity, courage, can be as daunting as facing flaws. A woman I counseled, a nurse, projected her leadership onto her assertive boss, feeling unworthy of authority. Through active imagination, she dialogued with this boss figure, discovering her own strength. Taking small steps, leading a team meeting, she began to embody this gold, transforming her career. Johnson notes that the shadow's gold feels divine, almost too big to claim, yet it's essential for wholeness. Rituals help here too. Visualize yourself embodying the trait, or create a symbol, a drawing, a token to anchor it. Patience is crucial, as the shadow resists quick fixes. Johnson compares it to tending a garden. You don't force a plant to grow, but nurture it with care. Daily practices build this care. Meditate on a shadowed trait, journal about triggers, or perform a ritual like lighting a candle for acceptance. Time matters. Early mornings or late nights, when the world is quiet, are ideal for shadow work. Consistency turns awareness into integration, making the shadow a partner, not a foe. Mythologically, owning the shadow echoes the hero's journey. In the tale of Parsifal and the Holy Grail, the knight faces trials, dragons, temptations that symbolize the shadow. Only by confronting them does he find the Grail, a symbol of wholeness. In Hinduism, Krishna dances with demons, integrating their energy into divine play. These stories teach that the shadow is not overcome but embraced, its energy redirected toward creation. Johnson's mandorla, the overlapping circles of light and dark, is a modern myth, a visual reminder that integration balances opposites. In our chaotic world, where anxiety, comparison, and division reign, owning the shadow is a radical act. It frees us from the cycle of projection, allowing authentic living. The process is not easy. It demands courage, humility, and persistence. Yet, as Johnson reminds us, to honor and accept one's own shadow is a profound spiritual discipline. Through awareness, dialogue, and ritual, we weave the shadow into our lives, not as a burden, but as a source of vitality. This is the path to wholeness, where every step, however faltering, brings us closer to our true selves. To live fully is to embrace a paradox. We are both light and dark, virtue and flaw, conscious and unconscious. The shadow, that hidden half of our psyche, is not a problem to solve, but a partner in the sacred dance of becoming whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection, nor does it mean erasing the shadow's rough edges, its anger, shame, or untapped brilliance. Instead, it means holding both sides, the bright and the dim, in a delicate balance that transforms our fragmented selves into something greater. This paradox, though challenging, is the key to a life of authenticity, where we find peace not by conquering the shadow, but by weaving it into the fabric of our being. The paradox of wholeness lies in reconciling opposites. The ego, our conscious self, craves clarity, good versus evil, right versus wrong. Yet the shadow thrives in ambiguity, holding traits we reject and potentials we fear to claim. Johnson draws on Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong journey to integrate these opposites into a unified self. The shadow contains some of our most powerful energies, he writes, and to be whole, we must honor both the light of our persona and the darkness of our shadow. This is not a battle but a marriage, a union symbolized by the mandorla, the almond-shaped overlap of two circles, one for the conscious, one for the unconscious. The mandorla is where opposites meet, where conflict becomes harmony. Consider a moment from my own life. Years ago, I prided myself on patience, presenting a calm exterior to the world. Yet, in private, I wrestled with bursts of irritation, shadowed impulses I denied. One evening, after a frustrating day, I snapped at a friend over a trivial comment. The guilt was immediate, but reflection revealed the paradox. I was not just patient, but also impatient, and both were true. By accepting this, I found a new balance, able to set boundaries without shame. This is the essence of wholeness, not choosing one side, but holding both, letting them inform each other. Johnson describes this as a spiritual act, akin to the alchemist's quest to turn base metal into gold, where the shadow's raw material becomes the substance of transformation. Mythology is rich with this paradox. In the story of Parsifal and the Holy Grail, the knight seeks a sacred cup that heals the wounded king and his barren land. The wasteland mirrors our fragmented psyche, torn by denied shadows. Parsifal's trials, facing dragons, temptations, are encounters with his shadow, and only by embracing them does he find the Grail, a symbol of wholeness. In Hinduism, Krishna's dance with demons reflects this same integration. He does not destroy them, but incorporates their energy into his divine play. The Christian story of Christ's descent into hell is another mandorla moment, where light enters darkness to redeem it, emerging whole. These myths teach that wholeness requires descending into the shadow, not to conquer it, but to dance with it. In daily life, the paradox manifests in our contradictions. The parent who loves their child fiercely yet feels fleeting resentment is living this tension. The worker who excels at their job but dreams of quitting embodies it too. Johnson suggests that denying one side, pretending to be only loving or only ambitious, creates imbalance. Wholeness comes from holding both, loving the child while acknowledging resentment, pursuing success while honoring the urge for freedom. A patient of mine, a lawyer, struggled with this. He projected competence to the world but shadowed his doubt, leading to anxiety. Through journaling, he began to accept his uncertainty, finding it fueled his empathy in the courtroom. By living the paradox, he became not less competent, but more human. Society often rejects this paradox, demanding we choose sides. Social media, like X, amplifies this pressure, rewarding curated personas that deny the shadow. We post our successes, hiding our failures. We champion causes, projecting our flaws onto opponents. Johnson would see this as a refusal of wholeness, where we split ourselves into good and bad, projecting the latter outward. Yet, the digital age also offers glimpses of integration. Raw, honest posts about struggle or vulnerability often go viral, resonating with our shared humanity. When we embrace our contradictions, we inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of authenticity. The process of living this paradox is not easy. It requires what Johnson calls a new form of courage, the courage to be imperfect, to hold opposites without collapsing them. Rituals help anchor this. Johnson's mandorla meditation is one. Visualize two circles, one for your conscious self, one for your shadow, and focus on their overlap. Draw this shape, or trace it with your finger, meditating on how your strengths and flaws coexist. Another ritual is dialogue. In a quiet moment, speak to your shadow as a friend, asking what it needs. I tried this once, imagining my shadow as a restless child. It told me it craved play, a need I'd suppressed for years. I began sketching again, a childhood joy, and found my life richer for it. Dreams are another tool. The shadow often appears as a dark figure or chaotic scene, urging integration. A woman I counseled dreamed of a wolf lurking at her doorstep. Frightened at first, she dialogued with it through active imagination, discovering it embodied her suppressed assertiveness. By acting on this, speaking up at work, she felt a new wholeness, her fear replaced by strength. Johnson advises recording dreams, noting symbols, and engaging them with curiosity. Over time, these encounters weave the shadow into consciousness, creating balance. The paradox extends to society's collective shadow. Nations project their flaws onto enemies, greed, aggression, while claiming moral superiority. Johnson notes that history's wars stem from this refusal to integrate the collective shadow, projecting it onto others. Ancient cultures managed this better through rituals. The Aztec sacrifices, India's bogeyman, or medieval carnivals allowed the shadow to express itself symbolically, preventing destruction. Modern societies, lacking such outlets, turn to low-grade expressions, scandals, polarization, or consumerism. Wholeness requires collective courage, acknowledging our shared flaws, from environmental neglect to social division, and integrating them through dialogue and action. In our personal lives, the paradox of wholeness reshapes how we see success. Johnson warns against chasing external markers, wealth, fame, that promise happiness but ignore the shadow. A CEO I knew chased accolades, shadowing his need for connection. His burnout forced him to face this, leading him to mentor others, finding joy in relationships over status. Wholeness doesn't reject ambition but balances it with vulnerability, ensuring we live fully in each moment. Johnson's insight is profound. To honor and accept one's own shadow is a profound spiritual discipline. This discipline frees us from the illusion that happiness lies outside, anchoring it within. The mandorla is a guiding image here. In medieval art, it frames Christ or the Virgin, symbolizing divine union of opposites. Johnson suggests we create our own mandorlas, not just in meditation, but in life. Hold your anger alongside your kindness, your doubt beside your faith. This is not passive acceptance, but active engagement, a daily practice of living the paradox. Small acts, journaling contradictions, pausing during conflict to reflect, or creating art from shadowed emotions, build this balance. Over time, the paradox becomes less a struggle and more a rhythm, like breathing in and out. In today's world, where anxiety and division pull us apart, the paradox of wholeness is a lifeline. We're bombarded with messages to be perfect, to choose sides. Yet true peace comes from embracing our contradictions. The shadow is not our enemy, but our teacher, guiding us to a fuller self. As we integrate it, we find not just personal harmony, but a way to heal our fractured world. Wholeness is not a destination, but a way of being, a dance of light and dark that makes life sacred. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows with Owning Your Own Shadow on the Midnight Paradox. If these reflections on wholeness resonate with you, hit that subscribe button to dive deeper into the mysteries of the psyche with us. Drop a comment below, share your own shadowed moments or insights. What paradoxes are you embracing? Let's keep the conversation alive under the midnight stars.